Ladies and gentlemen, the final countdown. A short adventure journey report from Tanzania. I would like to talk in this final lesson about our activities in the very nice African country Tanzania, where we have, together with the chair from Stefan, cooperation with a number of universities and also with a company who starts to build multi-story timber buildings in Tanzania. A short introduction and motivation. The overview of Tanzania. Tanzania is in opposite to Ghana, an East African country. So we are now in East Africa. Here is Lake Victoria up there. This is the Indian Ocean. Here is the wonderful island of Zanzibar. And which very famous rock star is born on Zanzibar, in Zanzibar town? A very famous rock star, one of the most famous rock stars all. Freddie Mercury, exactly. So there is, in Zanzibar, there's also a wonderful museum about Freddie Mercury, for example. So who is interested in Freddie Mercury and the story about him, he is born there because his father was an Indian lawyer, and he was located during the occupation by the British government. They represented UK, and after the revolution in 1964, when Zanzibar and Tanzania get independent, then they changed back to London. That's why Freddie Mercury is born on the wonderful island of Zanzibar. Here is Dar es Salaam, the main city. I will come back to Dar es Salaam very soon. Here is Morogoro, which is the location of one of our partner universities, Sokoine University. It's a forestry university. They are dealing with forestry and all the other things. And they have a lot of practical sites. So they have, I guess, nearly 100 hectares or even more available where they are able to do foresting and try foresting in this area. This is Iringa, where, for example, a lot of plantations are located. In total, Tanzania has a lot of forests, also compared to Germany. I will come back to this a little bit later on. Population trends are quite similar to this, what we heard from Renata Cutiero before from Ghana. This is the forecast of the population growth in Tanzania. You know, Africa is a very young continent at all, with a mean age of the population around 24 to 26 years. So it's really a young continent, and of course they are growing. And from 2022, with 61 million people, they will increase in 25 years. So they will double probably their population roughly in 25 years. And it brings me back a little bit to a statement of John Schellenhuber. Schellenhuber was the former CEO of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Change. And he mentioned in a conference only some weeks ago in Berlin, imagine if all the 400 million people China will bring to the cities in future, they will have all their housing only in concrete, then forget about climate change, we have no chance to tackle it. And if you add then in Africa another 400 or 500 million people which will move to the cities, mainly to the cities, and we have to build all the housing for them also in concrete, then, well, we have 1 or 2 or 3 meters higher sea levels in future, and you are able to go sailing in Hanover in Germany. That's not what we want to reach, of course. This is the reason and the motivation, of course, to try to help, especially also in Africa and in other countries, to develop timber structures, because we are able to store carbon in timber structures And if we are at the one hand side are able to plant enough wood and to grow enough wood in the forests on a sustainable basis, of course, and we are at the same time able to use this wood in a long time perspective as a carbon storage, we have a real chance to decrease the CO2 amount in the atmosphere. This is the main motivation why we try to help to develop timber structures all over the world. This is a map of Dar es Salaam, very nice located at the seashore, of course, with islands in front of it. So it's in principle, it's a wonderful location, nice climate. If you don't want to have winter and snow in the winter and want to go skiing, it's a perfect place to live, of course. It's really wonderful. But the very interesting thing is what you see here. Everything in pink are so-called informal areas. So areas which no regular building permits or things like that. They're with no regular planning of the city. The yellow ones are formal areas. These are areas where there is a city plan, where you have regulations, where people are following regulations. But of course, especially in these big African cities, and it's not only in Africa, it's also in South America, for example, the cities are growing in an irregular way. So you don't have rules at any point, of course. There are some forests also in the city, mangroves areas, also along this river deltas. In principle, a very big city even nowadays. And now imagine it's growing until 2050. The population will be doubled or even tripled. Some pictures from informal housing on the left-hand side, very often, of course, without infrastructure around, no streets and things like that. This is more or less an area of formal housing. That was an opposite of the hotel, I think, where we had our meetings with the universities. Even there, they struggle, of course, with implementing sufficient infrastructure. In Dar es Salaam, they build at the moment a kind of highways for buses. So not for trams or underground, but they build highways for buses in the city. In one direction, if you go from the city to the airport, it's finalized. It's quite quick and nice traveling, also with the car. If you're going from the airport to the city, it's a complete building site in principle. And at some corners, you have to stop and have to look into the hole if something is in, because you're able to drive through. There are really very big holes in the streets, etc., and hindering traffic, etc., even in the formal areas. But they are struggling. This is one of the areas here where they build these bus lanes. And, well, also in Germany, if you're going to Nuremberg, for example, at the moment, or even in Munich, we have a lot of building signs, and we all know that we are struggling with traffic when we have a lot of building signs in our cities. So it's the same also in Germany, for example. Tanzanian timber. Of course, they use timber even nowadays, sometimes to support old structures, to try to avoid collapses. Sometimes, of course, in the inner part of the buildings with beams, etc. This is in a renovation in Zanzibar City, where they build out this old timber and renovate the old structures. It's used for scaffolds, for example, and for other things, of course. What they also have, you can see it here, at this piece of timber, they have termites, of course. In addition to the challenges we have with timber protection, there are termites alive, and you have to protect the timber, of course, also against termites, and this is an additional challenge. You can solve that also in a constructive way. You sometimes have to use, unfortunately, chemicals, and this is the only point where I personally accept chemicals in timber. to avoid termite attack. But you can also do it with constructive methods, but that needs, of course, education, especially of the workers who are doing then these things on site. This is one of the most interesting points. Tanzania has a number of forests which are growing very fast. It's a type of pine they are growing, and the pine is growing very fast, of course. It's a very good climate with thick annular rings, of course. We did some tests, Lucas and Julian and others, we did some tests to classify them also for strength and stiffness properties. It's around C16, for example. So it's quite okay for timber framing, it's no problem. C16 is sufficient for timber framing, but of course they are struggling also to implement then enough processing. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. They harvest sustainable at the moment 62.5 million cubics. So that's more or less the same amount we harvest in Germany every year. It's more or less exactly the same. Sometimes if we have too much insect damages in our forests, we harvest up to 70, 72, 75 million. The Swedish forests are harvesting every year around 80 million cubic meters. Though in Tanzania they're harvesting nowadays 62.5 million cubics of wood annually, and I'm sure they would be able to do that on a sustainable way and doubling the numbers without any problems. Sustainable. But around 85% of the harvested wood is used as firewood and charcoal. So it's going completely for grills like that. At any corner in Dar es Salaam you find a grill on street, sometimes with vegetables, sometimes with chicken, sometimes with meat. Everything is done outside, everything is done with charcoal and timber. So 85% of the material is burned. And only a very low amount is used at the moment as material for buildings or for furnitures. As Renata mentioned, part of the wood is exported as logs, so as roundwood. Other parts are sawn. They are also producing, that was very interesting, they are also producing veneers on site and are dealing with the veneers only. So the peeling is done on site anywhere, and then they send the veneers to plywood fabrication, for example. That's also an interesting model, but 85% burned, which is in a way a CO2 neutral way of energy if you're looking to a period of 10 to 20 years, for example, but it would be much more better, of course, to use it looking at climate change in a long-term perspective as a material, as a carbon storage. You see on the left-hand side natural woodlands, on the right-hand side plantation wood, or what is called in one of the presentations before afforestation. So plantation wood growing very fast. I don't know anything about biodiversity, but according to the pictures I have seen from these forests, it's in a range or even better compared to that what we have in our forest at the moment if we are looking in a pure spruce forest, for example. What we did in our last journey in April. Yeah, time is running. Our last journey in April, we first had a workshop in Dar es Salaam together with RD University. This is in principle the Technical University of Tanzania. And also with Sokoine University, which is in principle the University for Forestry and Agriculture of Tanzania. Both universities are state-driven, as we are, same, and you can compare the Sokoine University or what they are doing, in principle, what Technical University of Munich is doing at our locations in Stefan and Freising. So more or less. CPS Africa is a private company which is trying to establish timber structures and timber housing projects, of course, to enlarge the business also to the mainland. And we have a lot of discussions with them. And in addition, it's not mentioned on this slide, we had Gatsby Foundation on board. Gatsby Foundation is a foundation which is supporting developing projects in whole Africa, especially in South Africa, but also in Kenya and in Tanzania as well. So day 1 and 2, we had presentations on timber as a material, and that was very interesting. Not only we presented what we are doing here in mid-Europe, in the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland. We had also a lot of presentations from our African partners, and that was very interesting, even to learn how they use their timber at the moment, what they are doing with harvesting, how they want to develop their forests, etc., etc. So that was a very interesting part for each of us, I guess, to learn about the others and to try to understand what is the thinking, what are the access to solutions, etc. And there are a number of points I think we are able to work together in future, and that's challenging on the one hand side because it's a big distance. On the other hand side, it's really very interesting, and fortunately everyone is speaking English, as English is the second official language in principle, compared in addition to the local languages. A very interesting part was what we are doing very often also with you, if you are a student here. We did a studio. Design to build, and we had a facility which is part of the ADI University. That was the description how to find the facility was quite funny. He said, okay, if you're coming down the street and then on the right-hand side, if you see a little lake, you know that you are at our place. And we don't really understand what he means with the lake in the middle of Dar es Salaam. The University of Dar es Salaam is obviously struggling with the same problems we have at Technical University of Munich, that the maintenance is not optimum at every place. And therefore they have some problems based on the street work aside, that the water is not going away from their yard, and their yard is a complete lake at the moment. So how we found it. But they also have a small Meyer Jens, where we are able to build a mock-up. So CPS, this is Ibrahim from CPS. He is educated as a carpenter, and he's a kind of carpenter master of CPS working in Zanzibar. Jacob and David made the design, or you made it together, I don't know. They made a design for a small, say, bus stop or something like that. And they pre-cut all the materials and brought it to this facility, as you can see here. And then we start to explain and say, okay, now we build it. And that was really interesting. At the beginning, we were completely unsure whether this will work or not. Will they participate? Will they not participate? I mean, it's the same with you students. Sometimes we don't know from the beginning, will you really be active or not? In most of cases, it's quite well, but Okay, then we start. It started how to find a rectangular position of the framework, for example. So how to measure the diagonals, etc., etc. Then step by step, more and more started to be active. Some of them never used a battery screwdriver, for example, and then they want to try, of course, and that was really interesting. Yeah, you see, there were a lot of fun, and I sometimes had I feared a little bit about that they had very nice clothes, and I sometimes feared a little bit that the clothes are damaged, but it worked quite well. And yeah, we had a lot of fun, and finally we had a bus stop. Without a roof, but this roof will be added, and then we asked, okay, should we take it down again when we finalized it? And they said, no, we have some ideas what we will do with it, and we place a roof on it, and yeah, we will see next time we go what happens with this small part. It was really simple, and it was just to demonstrate. We had also some people there from the Ministry for Housing, for example, and this guy was very interested. He knows Gustav knows Eurocode, of course, etc., but he had never seen how is a timber frame board really built. So we added OSB and showed then this is the stiffening part. We added also some gypsum plasterboard, explained that that's necessary for fire protection, etc. And I think the officials, the people from the official authorities, as well as all the others, understood quite well that we also had some insulation available we placed there. They really understood it's timber, working with timber is nice, even wearing nice clothes that works, yeah, and you are not dirty after if you're doing a masonry or something like that. It's okay, you can do something like that, and then it's clean again, fine. And they understood that it's quite quick, that it's a dry method, and it's applicable, of course, also in other countries and not only in mid-Europe. Then we added a site visit. CPS is located on Zanzibar, so we took a ferry. Traveling sometimes a little adventure, of course. Huh, Julian? That was. It's you need some nerves or enough experience to get calm. There's a lot of people, of course. Everybody's going. People are coming, taking your suitcases, bringing it anywhere, and it's a little bit difficult to get or to don't lose the overview of the situation. But then at the final end, everyone is friendly and it's very nice. And there are modern, very modern ferries, for example, between Dar es Salaam and Zanzibar. It's no problem at all, and it's quite nice. It's a very nice surrounding, of course, as well. On Zanzibar, CPS built a carpentry. It's a German carpenter, master carpenter, who started the business there. They built, I should change the slide. They built all the truss rafters by themselves. They used containers which was used for the transport of CLT and glulam, and sometimes also Konstruktionsvollholz, so normal solid timber, to Tanzania, because it was not enough available at the beginning from local sources. And they used that then as a part of the factory, in principle, built their own houses. It's raining during the rain time. It's raining every day a lot, so you have to protect it, of course, where you're doing the fabrication. What you don't need is a heating system. That's not necessary, of course. Cooling sometimes would be nice, but it's... and then they started to develop. They use, of course, up to now, unfortunately, quite a high number of European material. So CLT, glulam, solid timber, as I mentioned before, imported from Austria or from Germany. But at the same time, they start, of course, to use also more and more local timber, and that's what we try to help to develop. This is one of the 4-story houses we visited. So this is multi-story housing on Zanzibar. This is, of course, in areas which are formal, not informal. These are, of course, formal areas. You see that there is an internal staircase, this one. You see that there must be also European fire safety engineers on work there. There's a second escape route on both sides. It's, in my personal opinion, they reached quite a very good state. Of course, there are things which could be improved in detailing, etc. But that's no wonder. I mean, they started the business. We are doing this now since 25 or 30 years. So, for example, if you're looking at this point, this is a kind of barrier we built as well. This is a ventilated facade, so this is a panel which is covered with stucco then afterwards, but it's a ventilated facade. Would be nice to have a ventilation opening here and not sealed it. On the other side of the building, it was correct. Training. It's simple training of people that they learn to do it in a sufficient way. And therefore, if some of you are interested to go there and you have an education as a carpenter, and I know there are some in the room who have an education as a carpenter, they are looking for young people staying there and training with them and start to train their people to make it more perfect or also more robust, because as it is raining a lot, you have to look to the detailing. We have some more pictures from detailing, and I'm a checking engineer. I'm always looking a little bit critical when I'm on building sites, of course, but there could be improvements in, this is eucalyptus glue lamp, for example. There could be some improvements in constructive protection of timber material, because eucalyptus glue lamp from South Africa, in this case, is quite a very good material, but you can see that there is a lot of moisture impact, of course, and that you should probably improve a little bit the protection by construction. But these are these simple points. If you have a look inside, it's quite nice. Yeah? Though the glue lamp or the CLT of the floor structure is from Ante, in this case, or from Germany. So the industrial wood is more or less from Europe, but they try to build up, of course, also an own production of these materials in Tanzania. And of course, this is not what they call normally an affordable housing. Affordable housing, for the mean value of income, you have to decrease a little bit the price, and you have to optimize production, for example, to get to the range where they have an affordable household for the mean value of the income. This is housing for upper 20-30%, I would say, in Tanzania. But even there, it's okay. They have quite good window quality, for example. And as I said before, detailing could be improved. Very interesting was then a building site aside that, that we were on the building site and we looked up and we did not really, we were not able to explain where all the moisture on the floor is coming from, until we climbed up the ladder, and then we saw that it's a timber concrete composite. So they built also timber concrete composite structures on site. That's why they have the supports here also under the floor at this moment. When the concrete is hardened, then of course they take it out, but they also build timber concrete composites, and that works also there, for example. What are the chances for the future? Of course, there should be less use of timber as fuel, and more use of renewable energy. There are systems available, of course, but in quite a low amount at the moment. I haven't seen a single windmill. Have you seen a windmill when you traveled in Tanzania afterwards? No. I haven't seen a single windmill, for example, even there is a lot of wind on an island all the time. On Zanzibar, there is a very low amount of solar thermal energy production, and also very little amount of photovoltaic. So I think based on sustainable energy supply, there are a lot of chances to reduce the use of timber as a material for cooking and heating, and it would be much more better to use more solar energy, where they have, of course, a lot of solar radiation during the complete year. At the same time, standardization of timber construction with engineered wood products is a task. Here you see a sample of this Tanzanian wood, and you may recognize, of course, there are very big annular rings, so you have to deal a little bit other way with this. You have more twist in the material. You have to optimize, I think, the drying processes for the material. Though there is also a lot to do on scientific basis, of course, in the development, how to handle this material in a way that it's a proper or even a better construction material in future. They try to establish a finger jointing facility, for example, and on a long-term perspective, they try to establish also glue lamp fabrication and CLT fabrication. But that's step by step. For young people, it's a very interesting area. It's so people are very friendly, very open, very guest friendly as well. We had no negative experience. Well, you can have a negative experience on everywhere if you meet an idiot. But in principle, it's a safe country. People are very open-minded. If you are interested in this area, I think there is a lot to do, a lot of on the material science on the one hand side, on the construction on the other hand side, in the development, for example, of proper cross sections of wall and floor and roof elements. You have to do some building physics calculations, of course. We have all the methods available, like WUFI and other computer-based methods, but we have to do that, of course. We have to optimize the structures. We can help to optimize the structures, and at the final end, of course, you have to educate people, and that is what Renata said, and that what is true all over the world: education, 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 and again education, and then there is development, and this is, of course, very important, especially for these countries. Yeah, what are your thoughts about that? Let's a little bit discuss and finalize this first Munich Timber Colloquium with this final discussion. Before I end, I again want to thank the organizers. I want to thank every one of you coming today, spending your time with us. I'm looking forward for the second Timber Colloquium, which will be, as you said before, on 31st of March, from 12:30 onwards until late evening, hopefully. We will see. And we invite you heartily to continue discussions with us, participate, especially the young people, participate in the research in future. I think it's worthwhile to deal with timber, to help to develop timber community all over the world. Together with our colleagues from TimCoM, for example, also in the forest sector, of course, there is a lot of development to do, and there are also a lot of very interesting scientific questions. Robotic will also play a role in future, especially in these countries, and there are a lot of chances, and there is a lot of interesting work to do, not only in Germany and not only in mid-Europe, and development is always only happening if we are moving ourselves. And you know, Francis Picabia, our head is round so that our thoughts are able to change direction. So let's go. Thank you very much.